Hello, beautiful people. If you are a normal listener of the show, then you might be noticing an improved sound quality right now. I hope you are, at least. And that is because we've improved the audio setup here at the Danny Miranda podcast, and I'm looking forward to bringing you a better audio experience in 2021. You will only hear it in the intros and outros for the first month, but come February, you can expect some interviews with some incredible audio quality. Okay, let's get into the guest today, which is myself. Tej Dosa offered to interview me at the end of episode 1, and this is me taking him up on that offer. After I published that first episode, I got so many comments of people telling me they were looking forward to the reverse interview, and I'm grateful for that. This is by far the most comprehensive way I've ever told my story. In this episode, I go into diary entries and I go into my mental state at various points in the journey. So I hope there's something that you can resonate with and you could take from this episode and bring it into your own life. I hope this is an incredible way for you to start off 2021, and I would be thrilled if you could give me feedback for this episode. You could do that at Hey Danny Miranda on Twitter. You can also sign up for my free weekly newsletter, Tuesday Treasure. You could find that at dannymiranda.com/Tuesday. You'll find the coolest things that I find every week directly in your inbox. I would love to have you join the family, and if you'd like to do that, you can go to dannymiranda.com/Tuesday. Without further ado, let's get into the conversation with Tej Dosa featuring myself.
Interesting people, thought-provoking conversations, nutrition for your brain. Journey through the minds of the world's top performers and discover what it really takes to achieve your highest version. This is the Danny Miranda Podcast.
Bro, that's amazing because one of the reasons I wanted to actually do this interview and dig deeper into your story was because I feel like your story is one of alignment, right? Like when you started, going back to the Gary Vaynerchuk stuff, when you were 13, 14, 15, you had that blog. And in many ways, you were kind of doing what you're doing right now at 24, 25, right? But then it's you knew yourself back then, and so many of us, we lose ourselves as we get into adulthood, and many people live their entire life lost, but you had the balls to find yourself again and become aligned with who you are and embody that at scale. So that's the story I want to get into.
Dude, you just said it so well. And the truth is that after I got out of college, I had this idea for this website called Carpe Diem. And DM are my initials, obviously, and Carpe being seize the day, play on that. And I had a whole folder of posts that I was going to write. I could actually pull it up, what posts I had that I was going to write on Carpe Diem. So this is, I now have my notes open. And June 29th, 2018, I had this idea for a blog. And here were some of the post ideas. Taking the first step, realizing your potential, increasing your self-concept, the easy versus hard, being selfish and focusing on yourself, visualizing a goal, so routines and habits. So I had this idea in June of 2018. What happened was in June of 2018, I got distracted by money. I got distracted by, oh, wow, what is this thing called drop shipping? What is this thing? Forget Carpe Diem. Let me just make money. That's going to help solve problems. And it's so fascinating that now I'm going back to Carpe Diem. I'm going back to that blog when I was 13, 14, 15, and doing something so similar to that, the true version of myself. And tapping into that is where all the power lies from my perspective.
100%. And what's so interesting for me is because I've kind of got a behind the scenes look at your journey, right? From a little bit more than an outsider because like we exchanged quite a few emails. We've hopped on quite a bunch of calls. I've seen you when you were first starting out the journey. I've seen you during the journey. I've seen you now. And like just to see the difference has been remarkable, right? So like one thing I want to do to just start this off, because I feel like when people see you now, when they see you on Twitter, they just feel so much love and so much they just feel empowered and so positive, right? But I feel like it's very easy for people to not see where you were. So like just a little while ago, you were mentioning the start of January 2020 not being in the best place. And what's funny is I actually have an email from you back in September 9th, 2019. And I want to start there by reading this email to give people a very clear look at what your mindset was at that time. Yes. And then we can trace it back to where you are today. So then we can talk about the transformation that occurred and basically help other people create that same transformation and create a life of alignment.
Oh, man, that's beautiful. I forgot about that email.
So are you cool if I shared this email?
Absolutely.
All right. So I took out a little bit of start because of like some clicks and copy stuff, but this is like the meat of it. As you know, San Diego is fucking dope, but I'm in a big time rut. I really should be more motivated than ever. I'm in a sick location. I have some stuff, but not everything I want. But the truth is, I have no idea why. I just don't feel like doing anything except going to the gym. When I go to work, I just have no desire to. I wonder if this is just who I am, because I have the same mindset in college. When I go to think about an agency, I think I have no experience, so how can I be good? When I go to think about building a product business, I tell myself I'm not good enough. It's so weird, man. I know I should be grateful for the job, for the life I'm currently living, and in many respects, I am. I just don't care to do the work anymore. I say I want to. I say I'll snap out of it eventually, but insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I apologize for writing this email. I feel like a bitch. I debated hitting send multiple times. I'm sorry, man. End of email.
Oh my God. Dude, that is crazy. Holy shit.
How fucking wild is that? So the reason I bring this email up is for a variety of reasons, but I wanted to kind of start there because that kind of gives people a very good indication of where you were on September 9th, 2019. Now it's December 4th, 2020. So walk me through what happened during the time in between.
Okay, so first off, thank you for bringing that email up. Completely forgot about it. Second off, I think the appropriate place to go is September 18th, 2019. And understand that right after sending that email, a little bit after I quit the job that I was working on, and I felt an enormous weight off my shoulders, but I needed something to replace it, and I needed to do something. And I stumbled across this program called 75 Hard, and I was like, this is meant for me. Like, there was nothing, nobody could tell me that I wasn't going to do this program. It just felt like a calling. And I remember I went and I told my buddy about it, and he started doing it with me that day, the next day. And I told you about it on day one, and you said right away, I'm down. Let's start. And I was like, well, I already did day one. He's like, sweet. You're like, sweet, I'll do it too, and I'll start tomorrow. And so my question to you is, why were you so down to do it with someone, like a stranger from the internet, basically, this challenge? And like, what gave you the faith that I would, do it? And what was your thinking?
Yeah, so like the reason I was so down was because like one, usually I'm pretty down for like challenges and programs in general, but what it was about you in particular, right? So whenever from the jump, I think I got introduced to you in 2018, right? And like from being in business for quite some time, I've always been, or at least I developed the ability to really see the people who have really solid intent, right? So the reason I was really drawn towards you was because like from the jump, even when you were doing drop shipping, e-commerce, like even the way you went about doing drop shipping was really based on solid intent. For example, you created this course, and courses are usually a very slimy business, but the way you did it was honestly the most unique way I've ever seen. I think it was called transparent drop shipping, right?
Yep,
and
exactly.
it was like a behind the scenes look into your store where everybody else wasn't revealing their store. You took the complete opposite route and you just laid it all on the line. So like from the jump, I've always seen something in you that was just like solid intent. And it's so funny because like who you are now and who you have become, I really think it's who you have always been. But like you said, you let other things get in the way of who you were. And it was just a matter of discarding that to find the gold that was already inside you this entire time.
Well, thank you for that, man. And so to continue that journey, right, for people listening, it's like we did 75 hard and we did 75 hard together. And what happened was because I was doing this program, and for those of you who are unfamiliar, just going through the program real quick so you could get a taste of it. It's 1 progress picture a day, 10 pages of reading, nonfiction or self-help, clean diet, 2 workouts a day, 1 outside, and 1 gallon of water. You can't drink alcohol. You do that for 75 straight days, no excuses, no nothing. And at the time, it was the hardest thing that I had done in my life. And it was so interesting because I started off this challenge like I didn't want to let you down. That was why I started. Like in the beginning, I wasn't going to let you down, and that was the most important thing, not letting you down, because I was like, this dude is doing this with me and I can't let him down. And then it's so funny because as the program progressed, I still didn't want to let you down day 75, but I also, my self-image had grown. In the beginning, I didn't think of myself that highly on September 18th when we started. And by the end, I was feeling like, wow, like I am capable of doing difficult things. I'm capable of doing what I'm supposed to be doing. This is interesting because prior, I didn't think of myself capable of doing what I was supposed to be doing. And that was a huge transformation for me and built myself up to this point where like I thought higher of myself after completing it than I did prior.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to continue, it's like, then, man, like once you have a higher self-image, I then went into a place, fast forwarding a little to January of 2020, of feeling like I couldn't do what I said I was going to do. And going through my notebook is like I was back in that place of despair that you saw, that you read that email September 2019, I was back in that same place. And I got to that same place because I couldn't do what I said I was going to do. And it was hard for me to restart the cycle. And that only changed because of COVID.
Mm. So that's amazing. Like to see the transformation and kind of like how quickly you got on the journey after September 9th is remarkable. But I want to take a step back for a minute, right? And I want to go a little bit deeper into the job you were working at the time, because from my understanding, the job was an amazing job with amazing people and it paid amazingly well, right? So I want to kind of backtrack a little bit and kind of ask you questions related to how did you have the courage to understand that that job working in that space was no longer serving you, and to kind of have the balls to let go of that money at that time? Because I feel like a lot of people aren't living a life in alignment, but the perks of that life are too good for them to let go, at least in their mind. So how did you have the balls to say like, yo, this is an amazing life. I'm doing amazing things, working with amazing people, doing amazing work, but my heart's not really in it. And I need to kind of let this go, kind of go back to ground zero and start over. How did you have the guts to make that initial call?
It was tough, man, because in that place, I was going back and forth. I was drinking. I was gambling. I was watching a lot of Joe Rogan and just watching a lot of just things on YouTube that I was just like, what am I doing? Like, I didn't feel fulfilled every day. I didn't wake up with a zest for life and just interested in doing things that were exciting. I felt like a drone. And how I got to that point of being able to say no to it was I was just looking out at the La Jolla Cove, man, and just realizing like this isn't for me. And at that time I wasn't meditating, but I would go to the La Jolla Cove and it was almost like meditation, just staring out into the sunset, asking yourself the deep questions of like, is what I'm doing really what I want to be doing forever? No. Then like, what am I doing? And it's so hard too, because when you invest time in something, I had invested so much time. June 2018, it felt like so much time, to September 2019. To me, it felt like I invested this year. I'm literally going to waste this year of my life if I don't continue with this. But there was something in my heart that was saying, this isn't for me. This isn't for me. Like, you have to figure out a new way. You have to, and I just listened to it, man. That's just the truth of it.
Wow. What just like to go off on a side note here, if somebody's in that position right now, what tips would you give them based on your own experience?
I would say meditation is something that, had I had that tool and been consistent with it earlier, I would have been in a better place mentally, because meditation being listening to yourself. And I hate to tell people, meditate. Like, I don't even think meditation's for everyone. But I do believe that you have to have some consistent form of listening to yourself. And if I had that, I would have made that decision quicker and it wouldn't have been as painful.
So going off meditation, what's like you say listening to yourself. So describe that a little bit. Like what does the practice entail?
Yeah. So I started meditating because of you. You told me to do it and I just said, okay, like, let's do it. Like, if it works for Tej, it's good enough for me. And 20 minutes in the morning I started, 20 minutes a.m., and I literally hated it, man. I'd roll out of bed, sit on the floor, back straight, relatively straight, with a cushion to make it comfortable, and set a timer, not the phone, like get an actual kitchen timer for the phone. And what I did, I would just let thoughts come, like just try to witness the thoughts as they come in, and don't try to beat yourself up. Like, it's not about anything. Like, that's the crazy part. Like, as I've gotten more into meditation, going deeper, it's like, when you start at the beginning, it's like going to the gym. You're building a muscle. And if you can just sit there and put the 20 minutes in day after day, I mean that you get better at the skill of meditation, and you get better at understanding what your true intentions are and what your true feelings of a situation are, because we're going through the world all the time. And in 2021, people are throwing messages at us all the time. There is more nonsense you open your phone and everyone wants your attention. Everyone wants you to convince you of something. And even if you read a book, you're literally reading someone else's thoughts. But what makes meditation so powerful is you are reading your own thoughts for the first time. And I had never done that before. And so when I started doing the practice, I hated doing it. Like, literally going to the gym, I hated doing it. But if you commit to the goal of saying, okay, I'm going to do this every day, 20 minutes in the morning for 3 months, and then I will judge the results. Is my life better off after 3 months? You could do that with working out. You could do that with meditation. It's the same thing. I think that is really powerful. And also to have someone who you respect and admire, if they say to do it, that's going to help you do it. So yeah, those are my tips for someone in that type of situation.
Bro, that was full of gold. Meditation is reading your own thoughts. That's a bar right there, bro.
I mean, usually we have these phone calls and they're not recorded. So it's good. It's good that we have this on the mic so that people could benefit from this.
Exactly. Like, dude, those calls we used to have, like, would leave me high for days after. Like, no joke.
That's so good to hear. Yeah, it's the truth. Like, and all of our calls, like every time we get on a call together, I just feel so uplifted. And it's crazy because the response to our first podcast, incredible. Like people, I get messages about it to this day. And we recorded that August 23rd, a month before the podcast released. And it's like people are still messaging me about it to this day, saying like, I felt the energy. I felt like I was right there with you guys. So it's just incredible to see that now we are scaling that conversation to a wider audience. And I'm so grateful for everyone listening.
Yeah, like that's amazing. So let's pick up where we left off, right? So like September 9th, around that time, living out of alignment, you discover 75 hard. Things are going amazing. I remember those phone calls. We were both jacked up, high on life. And then early 2020, 75 hard ends, and kind of there's this phase where you kind of slip back out of alignment, right?
Yep.
So when you're in that state, how did you pick yourself back up, and how did you kind of start listening to that inner voice again and get back on your path?
Yeah, so going through my journal entries from January, February, and early March of 2020, which I was doing prior to this phone call, is like, it's the same voice that you heard in that email that you read. It's the same thing. And it's crazy because I got back to that place and then I pulled myself out of it because COVID hit. And COVID hit and I started to realize it was serious, and I got really depressed that it was serious because I was depressed because no one was taking it seriously, but I thought I knew that it was going to be a big deal, and I was worried for my grandparents. I was worried about, the society. Everything was going to change forever. And then I had a week of doom and gloom in addition to the 2 months prior of doom and gloom in 2020. And then March 15th, I said, you know what? Enough of this. I am going to start a website. I'm going to start phase 2 rather, or phase 1. I don't know. I would start one part of the Live Hard program. I believe it was phase 1. And I just committed to it. Okay, 30 days. Let me get through these 30 days. I did 75 hard. Like, let me get through it. And I'm going to use this COVID time as a time to come out of quarantine. Had no idea how long it would last. I'm going to use this time to come out stronger. Instead of using it as an opportunity to be upset, I'm going to use it to propel me forward. And I've literally kept that same energy from March 15th to, we're recording December 4th and into 2021. That is the energy of like, okay, life throws you a situation. Great. Let's do something about it. Let's make life better. And so it was starting that phase 1 program, which meant taking cold showers. It meant visualizing 10 minutes a day. So I was doing all the 75 hard habits, but then I was also adding the additional habits. And doing this really made me realize, like, holy shit, I do have this in me to accomplish what I set out to accomplish. And I think I had my first post on DannyMiranda.com on March 28th. And I also said, I'm going to stick to 2 posts a week for 1 year and then just judge the results on this website. And yeah, man, here we are today.
Wow. So after you finish phase 1, right? Like, to kind of compare it to the first time you did 75 hard and kind of how you fixed maybe the mistakes in between or after you finished that program. So after you finish phase 1, was your solution to not falling back off track to kind of set these new habits, whether it was with writing, meditation, journaling, whatever, and stick to those habits because you knew you couldn't really let your foot off the gas pedal? Because I feel like even with myself, like when I first did 75 hard for the first time, like it was amazing, right? And then like I think the day I finished, I was like drunk with my friends, know? And
Same.
then I kind of went off the rails for a little bit, and then I was like, oh fuck, like life was so amazing when I was doing 75 hard with Danny. Maybe I should get back on it. And then I did. And then I was like, oh, maybe I should just stay on something like this instead of just keep going up and down like an idiot, So like what was your experience? Was it like that same sort of realization where you're like, habits really are the key to really staying in alignment, living a good life. And like, whether I'm on a program or not on a program, I'm just going to set certain habits for myself and stick to them. Was that the answer for you?
Yeah, I think what happened in December, after we finished 75 Hard the first time, I think what happened was I didn't have standards for myself. And what happens with 75 Hard is you have standards for yourself every day, and you do them whether or not you feel like it. And that is exciting, and that helps you in life. And you are ahead of 99% of people doing that, and you feel good about yourself doing that. But then when you get off the program, or at least when I got off the program the first time, I was like, I don't need standards. Like, I'm a champion. I defeated the 75 Hard. Look, I won. I'm on day 76. Haha, look at me. And so I stopped having any standards for myself. I still went to the gym. But I did it whenever I felt like it. It was less routine, less structured, less I had to hit this. And what you saw from looking back, it's obvious, from December 2019 to March 2020 is a slow decline in the standards I was setting for myself, while I still knew I was capable of the standards that I was hitting in 75 Hard. So it was a mismatch between what my self was and what I was capable of doing it, and it really threw my brain for a loop and made me really upset, right? Because you get really depressed or upset or anxious when there's a difference between what you feel you're capable of and what you're actually doing. If you think of yourself as average, one, you're probably not listening to this podcast, but if you think of yourself as average and you achieve average, you're content, you're happy. There's a lot of people out there living great lives and successful lives in the sense of they're serving others, they're happy, they're average, whatever. That's not, but the problem is when you start to look at yourself higher, like, oh, I'm better than average, and I thought I was better than average because I had shown it to myself by doing 75 Hard, but then I wasn't living it. That's a real problem. And how I got around that by phase one was realizing, like, I need to have standards for myself. After I finished phase one, 30-day program, on April 15th, I still was doing 2 posts a week. I still was tweeting. I still was doing the things that I said I was going to do, meditating, right? So I was sticking with, I wasn't using the program as a crutch to just say, oh, I could fuck off now. No, I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, even though I wasn't technically on the program. And that was super helpful by having standards for myself.
Amazing. So follow-up question, right? I feel like myself included, people go about setting standards for themselves and they do a really good job, right? But like, when they're not on a program like 75 Hard, when they're not accountable to somebody else externally who they respect or whatever, and they're only accountable to themselves, I feel like those people, and myself included, have a very easy time of letting those standards slack. And what I always admired about you is I think you kind of figured it out in the sense that even I was watching you very closely. Not like a stalker or anything, or maybe, I don't know. But like when you were going about creating this podcast or when you were going about launching your new blog, you wouldn't just say like, oh, I'm going to post 3 times a week. You would set a definite goal. Like for this podcast, I believe it was like, I'm going to record 100 podcasts and then I'm going to see what's up. Then I'm going to make a call from there. So like, I feel like that's kind of your way of not slacking on the standards you set for yourself, because it's kind of like creating a new program for yourself based on whatever you want to do. So talk a little bit about that and how you kind of arrived at that.
Well, because I care so much about the audience, whoever's listening right now, I care so much of what they think. I simultaneously care a lot and don't care at all about what they think, and that's a conversation maybe for later. But because I care about what they think, I am putting that out, and they are my accountability buddy. They don't even know it, but if I say I'm posting 100 times and I don't, one person might message me and say, hey, you didn't post, and you said you were going to. And that, and especially important when you're starting, because when you're starting, it's like you don't have any feedback, you don't know if your shit's any good, you don't know anything. All you know is that you set a contract to yourself. And so when you have that contract, it allows you the freedom to just not care about the numbers. And the numbers could be whatever metric you care about that's external. It could be followers. It could be amount of downloads. It could be anything, page views, whatever. And these are all metrics that I look at. But guess what? It doesn't matter what those metrics are if you set a promise to yourself, because you know you're in it for the long term. And guess what? In order to get results in anything, you need to be in it for the long term. And that doesn't mean you have to do things forever. But if you notice people who are great, if you look at Gary Vaynerchuk and look at his content that he put out 1,000 episodes of Wine Library TV. You think that was by accident that Gary Vaynerchuk is Gary Vaynerchuk? No, he started in 2007, right? Like, it's just a matter of building numbers up to a certain point. That's how I look at it. And if you can do that while genuinely giving a fuck about the people who are listening and genuinely caring, like, that is the best of everything. And that's what I'm trying to do. Did that answer your question?
Okay. Yeah, hell yeah. So follow-up question. How do you go about genuinely giving a fuck about people? Because I feel like most people, right, whether they're marketers, business people, entrepreneurs, whatever, I think that makes up the bulk of the people listening to this podcast, writers, whatever, right? I feel like when we first get started on the journey, it's more so like, how can I serve myself? But I feel like the most successful people, whether it's the Gary Vaynerchuks of the world, whether it's the Elon Musks, Richard Bransons, whatever, Steve Jobs, they have a service orientation, a service to others, right? So how do you go about developing that? Is that something you develop, or is that something, or do you just go about unprogramming the bullshit because that's more in tune with our natural state to actually give a fuck about other people?
It's a great question. And I'm going to pull up a quote from Martin Luther King that Johnny Kim said, but it's from Martin Luther King Jr., which is like, everyone is capable of greatness, not fame, because greatness is determined by service. And it's a great quote. But to directly answer your question, I think it is something that we are capable of getting better at it. And how I directly have gotten, quote unquote, better at caring about other people has been through two things. One, going back to the meditation. When you meditate, when I've meditated, I'm just going to speak from my experience. I have felt closer to all things than I ever did in my entire life. And I was not someone who gave a fuck about anyone. And this is just the truth. Like, if you look at me 5 years ago, it's like all I cared about was myself. All I cared about was getting drunk. All I cared about was my friends. Yeah, my friends. But like, I didn't care. I went about life like thinking that I was number one. And what's happened when I've meditated and read spiritual books / read your emails is like realizing that we are all one. And when I say we are all one, I mean like plants, trees, birds, squirrels. Like, I'll go outside now and I'll see a connection in anything that has a heartbeat, anything at all. Like, I feel connected to it, and I never felt that way ever before. And I believe that's a direct result of meditation, spiritual books, and doing it consistently and going in depth on my own issues and feeling connected to all things. Yeah, man.
Wow. That's amazing, because I feel like if you were to still like study your story, study your rise, and like this podcast is crushing. Congratulations again, by the way, on the 10,000 downloads. Amazing, right? I feel like the reason, or one of the reasons that are responsible for your success is because you actually put people first, right? Before even starting this podcast, I remember when you would go on Twitter and you would be like, I'm just full of love. I just want to spread love. I just want to spread good energy. Does anybody want to hop on a 30-minute call with me? And like, I remember you would take calls with so many different people, and I would talk to them like a little bit later, like whether they were like clients or students or whatever. And they'd be like, yo, that Danny Miranda, like his energy is infectious. I was like, yeah, right. And like, it was so amazing to see on the timeline how you would just take calls with random people that you didn't know, and you were really scaling the unscalable. So like, what was your reasoning behind doing that. And it's so funny to see that because that kind of translated into this podcast now. So it's like so mindfucky how once you put other people before yourself and just try to serve them, it naturally starts resulting in success like this podcast.
Everyone else has the answers. That's the crazy thing that we haven't figured out. Before I started my podcast, 2 different friends, one other person said, "Oh, you should start a podcast." And every time they said it, I was like, nah, like it's not for me. But I started doing those calls because I felt so much joy and so much love, and I felt like I could give someone something. I didn't know what it was, but I just felt that in my heart. And I felt that the tweets and DMs and messages weren't doing that justice. And so I wanted to, as a way to expand it, to give that to other people. You know, like I felt so fulfilled and so happy when I was helping other people going through their own struggles, or I could use my experience because I've been through, you know, real depression where I've like thought about just like ending it all. And then I've been on the other side of that where just so much love and so much happiness and genuinely just want to give to others. So I've seen both ends of the spectrum. And when you've seen both ends, you really want to give back and you really want to help people in any way possible. And listen, I don't have many skills. Like I'm not an amazing copywriter like you. I'm not a good marketer by any means. I'm not like anything. But what I do have is love in my heart. And if I can give that love to someone, then whether it be a one-on-one phone call or a message or whatever, like that is everything to me. And so that's what this podcast is. And I was doing so many of these phone calls and I said, you know what? It's such a shame that people cannot get these phone calls too. Like why just one person? Like the internet allows, you know, us to spread this to multiple people, to everyone. And so that's how the podcast came to be. Is like I just was taking phone calls and I was like, oh my God, more people should be getting this. And so far it's like people seem to love it. And it's like I love recording them. I love learning about all these amazing people. And I'm so grateful that other people seem to enjoy it as well.
Amazing. So after recording like a bunch of these podcasts, what patterns have you seen in the guests that you've interviewed with regards to what were the keys to success? Like what are the common patterns you picked out? What are the lessons you've learned from just interacting with a bunch of diverse guests who are successful in a bunch of different fields?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the truth is, I don't know because I haven't spent time to really analyze it. But off the top of my head, I mean, everyone I talk to is a hard worker. Everyone is willing to put in hard work, quote unquote hard work, but for most of them, it doesn't seem like hard work to themselves. So I think that is such a key to success in any ventures. Like what would you do for fun? What it just seems like play to you, but to others it's like work. Like for this podcast, for example, I record 7 podcasts a week. I could put out so many podcasts. Like I could do one a day. Like that's how it feels at sometimes because I love having conversations with people. And to other people, it seems like it's a lot of work. Like, what do you mean you're doing all these podcasts 3 a week? That's crazy. But like having conversations with people, are you kidding me? three conversations a week. This is fun. And so, yeah, I think that a key is that between a lot of guests is that they do hard work that doesn't seem like hard work to them.
Yeah, that's a killer insight. Now what I want to do is I kind of want to talk about kind of going back to the orientation of kind of putting other people first, right? I want to talk about once you started living your life in alignment, right? I remember we had numerous calls where you would share stories of like how you embodying love, embodying presence, joy, these higher states of consciousness started rubbing off on those around you, right? So I kind of want to touch upon that in the sense that like you shared numerous examples, numerous stories with me about how that happens. And I feel like the reason I want to touch upon that is because I feel like a lot of people sometimes think that working on themselves is selfish, but really it's the most unselfish thing you can do, because once you light up, you literally light up your mom, dad, brother, grandma, grandparents, whatever, whoever is around you, right? So kind of touch upon how once you started living a life of alignment, the effect that it started happening, that it started having on those around you.
Such a great question. And I'll bring up one situation in particular that I believe I shared with you that just blew me away. It was like, it was towards the end of 75 Hard. I came home. I was living in San Diego, came home to New York for Thanksgiving break. I was doing everything that I was supposed to be doing, and I was feeling good. Life was flowing. That's just how I call it. When you're living in alignment, life is flowing. And I go to my grandparents' house. I'm very close with my grandpa and my grandma, super grateful for them. And I remember just having a conversation with my grandma and her telling me that my presence was giving her more life. And
wow.
It was such a powerful moment for me because, my grandma is 80 years old. She's full of life. She's full of energy. She's the most wonderful woman in the world, and I'm so grateful for her. And it's like her telling me that just lit me up. Like I was so excited, and I was like, oh my God, all the things that I'm doing are really having an effect on other people. And so that was just a huge holy shit moment. And
wow.
If I was smarter, right, it would have been like, oh, keep doing those things. But instead, obviously, you go down the other path. But it's like, that serves you as well. But it's just, that was a moment where I was like, oh my God, like, Tej, you're never going to believe this. Like, this is doing this. Like, this is having this effect on people. So, I mean, but the examples go on and on. It's crazy, man.
Bro, I remember when you told me that, I was like, holy shit, like you won the game of life. Like most of us spend all our lives trying to achieve XYZ so we can get some state at the end of those goals and then embody that state and have an effect on other people. But really, I don't personally agree with that approach because I feel like using you as an example and other people, you can actually embody those states from day one and light up all the people around you because everything you need is really inside you. So like my question for you is, you're a very ballsy guy because like if you think about it, everybody our age, right, is really invested in making money, getting girls, doing whatever, and they kind of use those things as a vehicle to achieve states of love, joy, living a life of flow. But you took the opposite route. You're like, screw that. I can get XYZ states before anything, and I can embody those, whether my life is going up, whether it's going down, whether it's neutral, whatever. So like, how did you make the decision, or did it just come naturally to make that happen? And two, what advice would you give to other people? Because like for me personally, I kind of made that mistake. I was like, oh, I need to make money. I need to do this. I need to do that in order to feel XYZ. And then I made the money. I did that. And I'm like, you know what? I don't really feel that much different. Like it's the same old shit. Right. So I was like, let me try to do it the other way around. Let me feel XYZ state regardless of what's going on. And I feel like once you do that, you really win the game of life because nothing can really fuck with you anymore. And you can have such a great impact on those around you, whether you're high or whether you're low in the game of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not like I was born this way, like there were moments, right? You're looking at 2019, like there were definitely moments where I was trying to use other things to try to get that feeling of love. And it's like consistent meditation has been we're going back to it over and over.
Bro, now you know why I kept telling you to meditate.
100%. But that's really what the difference maker was. When I started to listen to myself, I started to realize that, holy shit, I can give myself all the love there is. And that is something that I could spread to other people. And then I don't care about the money I mean, that's great, but it's like, I don't need it, because I've got everything I need right now. And I was trying to, find other ways of getting that love in 2019, and 2020, early 2020, couldn't do it. But once I started those habits in March 15th, I would say, 3 months in, by June of 2020, I mean, I have a journal entry here. Let me pull it up. It's like June of 2020. I said, life is flowing. I'm on day 2 of phase 2. My brother's starting his 75 hard journey, and I am that beacon of the light. I'm the happiest I can remember. The past 3 months have been the period of greatest personal, mental growth in my entire life. I'm enjoying the process of meditation, exercise, building DannyMiranda.com. This is a wonderful journey. I promised myself I would commit to the process. So far, so good. When I used to start journeys like this, I would sabotage myself. I'd find a way to tear myself down. But this is the opposite. I'm building my way up. I am inspiring the world. I am having an incredible impact.
Damn.
People are changing their habits and building themselves up because of me. Keep up the great work, Danny. Keep flowing. Keep spreading light and positivity to all who come in contact with you. This is June 2nd, 2020, 5:45 in the morning.
Wow. Bro, how crazy is it that you share that journal entry and then I shared the one from September 9th, and to just see where you were in both places? That is the ultimate testament to exactly what you're saying. Unbelievable.
I think that you can feel, and I certainly felt tied to that. Like I felt tied to one perspective of myself. Oh, I can't do this. Oh, this is who I am. But what's really interesting is, like, if you believe that about yourself, that you can't do X, Y, and Z, you can also believe that you can. Like, if you have a belief about yourself that's negative, you can turn that into a positive. And the fact that you believe something about yourself shows that you can have the opposite belief. And I just don't want anyone listening in a difficult situation, a mediocre situation, an average, to feel as if they are tied to that because their past looks that way. It doesn't have to be. And I think that's a really important message I want to get across.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Like, just to hear that journal entry was amazing beyond belief. So, kind of going into some of the habits that allowed you to make that transformation happen, I feel like one of the habits that I've really admired in you that you've stuck to is the no alcohol habit, right?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like, because I remember having conversations with you, and I remember having conversations with you when you were kind of in the, like Kanye says, the sunken place, right? Where you weren't living in alignment, things were whatever, you're just going with the motions. And like many young people, myself included, you were like drinking every day, partying, doming bottles of wine, whatever, doing your thing, which a lot of young people do. But this year, if I'm not mistaken, I think you've gone with no alcohol, right? So what are some of the impacts, benefits that has on you? And just kind of talk about more about the role alcohol was playing in your life pre-transformation and currently with no alcohol.
Yeah, it's I'm so happy you brought it up because I wouldn't have thought to bring it up. I forgot about it. It's just part of who I am, not drinking. And I haven't drank since March 1st of 2020. And it's crazy because I didn't feel as if I had a problem with alcohol. I had a problem gambling, like a real problem gambling, but not a problem with alcohol. I wouldn't say I was addicted to alcohol. And gambling, we could get into really quickly, is like, I told my parents that I was addicted to gambling, and in February of 2020, February 1st or late January, and I haven't gambled since. And telling them that set me free from that. So that's a little tip for anyone who feels addicted to anything and you're hiding something. Tell someone that you respect and admire. I respect and admire the hell out of my parents. I'm so grateful for them, and they set a high standard for me. So I I told them that, and they had no idea, and that set me free from it. But to go back to the alcohol, played such a huge role in my life. It's like, it's really crazy if you think about it, that we're all, so many people, we just make it so easy for alcohol to be consumed. And it's really, it's kind of weird to think about. Like, this is a drug. This is something you put in your body. This affects you. And we've normalized it, and we've made it cool. And it's like kind of like listening to myself. Once you start listening to yourself, you start to not, you're just listening to yourself. So you just want what's best for yourself, and you start loving yourself. And if you start loving yourself, then you don't care about alcohol, because like that doesn't help you in any way. And so it was really interesting, because my friend Dito, shout out Dito, man, because this dude is currently in med school, and he was telling me he started working on his streaks and his habits, and he's been doing that for months now, and he thinks it's so interesting that he stopped having a desire to drink for 2 months, and he's just living in alignment with this highest version, and his highest version doesn't include alcohol. And we used to drink all the time in college, and he didn't have a problem with it either. But it's like, when you start doing that, you forget about anything other than what is going to make you better. And so, yeah, I mean, it's played such a huge role. It's so important. And I can't see myself drinking, but I'm not going to set anything like, oh, I'll never drink again. Right. I just want to say, like, up to this point, it's been incredible, like, not drinking, having the streak of clarity and clear-headedness and momentum. Yeah. That's the biggest benefit by far.
Yeah, that's great. See, like, one of the patterns I'm seeing from just like speaking to you and like from previous conversations, right? I'm always curious to see what was the initial domino that fell that allowed all the other dominoes to fall as well, right? I feel like most people, they like pick up a self-help book, or they like read some blog article, or like whatever, an email, and then they would get so jacked up and be like, okay, I'm going to start doing XYZ to better my life. But because they haven't dropped that initial domino that they really needed to drop first, that progress kind of becomes very hard to either do or maintain, right? But I feel like for you, that initial domino, at least from my opinion, that fell, that allowed everything else to fall in place with flow, with less friction, with less force, was you develop the capacity to love yourself. When you start loving yourself, you don't want to poison yourself with alcohol. You don't want to surround yourself with toxic people. You don't want to put yourself in situations that aren't in alignment with who you are. And you just start automatically picking and choosing the things that serve you. And you have a far easier time letting go of that which doesn't serve you. So, one, would you agree with that? And two, if so, how do you recommend that other people go about loving themselves?
Yeah. So, such a great question. I totally agree. And I got into it. I got into loving myself by reading Kamal Ravikant's book, Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. And at the time, I was reading a book, a nonfiction book of a guy who was in a much worse situation than I was. I believe his friend died and his girlfriend broke up with him, and his company failed all in the same week or something crazy like that. And he got over it by just saying, I love myself, over and over. And I didn't even think of it as an affirmation, because, affirmations to me were woo-woo, and they weren't, they weren't practical. So this is how I'm thinking. But I was just like, okay, this guy was in a much worse situation than me. This is his story. Who am I to say that this won't work for me? Like, that's pretty dumb of me to say that. Like, let me just try this for 30 days. So on my to-do list of something that I had to do every day was I had to tell myself I love myself at least 10 times a day. And I would literally check it off the to-do list. I remember this so clearly, along with the other habits that I would have to do. So eventually it just became part of me. Like, I would just tell myself I love myself. I would look at myself in a mirror, narcissistic shit, it would seem like to someone else. But when you love yourself, you're really, if you're loving yourself, you're loving everybody. And I know that might sound weird, because in our culture, it seems like if you love yourself, you only care about yourself. But that's not what I mean by when I say I love myself. I mean, I am you and you are me. And if I love myself, I love you, therefore. So that's kind of how I think about it. And it just started with repeating it over and over. I love myself. I didn't even believe it. I didn't care about it. But you do it enough times, you have no choice but to feel it. And then when you do it enough times and feel the love, like one thing that I would picture over and over is I would feel the love and like where it would register in my body. And then another thing I would do is I would visualize myself on this path that I always walk down. And I would visualize myself on the other end of that path giving me a hug when I reach the end of it. And I would do this. I would do this all the time in the shower, before bed.
Wow.
And it was super beneficial and helpful. And I highly recommend other people do it if it sounds interesting to you.
Bro, that's amazing. I like the fact that you brought up how you incorporated feeling and visualizations into the I love myself mantra, right? Because I feel like it's easy to kind of just make it a mental thing, but really it's an entire conscious experience type of thing.
Yep. Absolutely. And that goes back to the meditation. There's going to be a common theme. People are going to be annoyed at us. But it's like when you meditate, you're forced to sit with your feelings.
If people don't meditate after this episode, I'm going to be choked.
Yeah, I know. So, but that's the thing about meditation is like you sit there and you're forced to say, okay, like what am I feeling? Where am I feeling this? And another book, Conscious Living. Like I'd read this book and I was like, holy shit, like my life changed. And I read it in August, I believe, of 2020, and I noticed that I had changed my life from March to August, and I was like, oh my God, this is the book that is the guidebook for people to do what I just did without realizing what I just did. And so, yeah, I read Conscious Living, and then, the interview with Gay Hendricks will come out soon, which is awesome. But yeah, in that book, it talks about feeling different emotions in your body, feeling where anger lies, and it might be different for every person, but it's important to get to know your body, because when we grew up, no one told us, at least where I'm from, no one told us, hey, you should listen to your body. Your body holds pain. Your body holds anger. Your body holds these feelings. And if you don't forgive yourself, if you don't release them and become aware of it, you can't release them. And that's something that you taught me, which is like before bed, daily forgiveness, like forgive yourself for not doing the things that you said you were going to do, or forgive other people for the way they looked at you the wrong way, or their tone of voice, or whatever it may be. If you don't do that, you're not starting the next day on a clean slate. And you taught me that. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Brother.
Yeah. I feel like what's so funny is like the stuff that sounds like the corniest is actually the stuff that really works the best. Yeah.
And it's crazy because if you told me I would be saying or doing any of these things 3 years ago, I would have told you you're crazy. And I think life works like that on purpose, right?
Right.
Because it's like you need to be open-minded to try things. You need to be able to say, okay, like I am, let me just try this, and have no judgment about it. Because we get into a lot of problems when we start judging things like, oh, I would never do affirmations. Oh, I would never. And I've said all those things, oh, those are woo-woo. That's weird, whatever. And when you start judging everything, you forget about all the amazing things that are possible in life. And it's like we need to remove as much as possible that judgment of ourselves and other people in order to truly feel in alignment and truly feel at one and at peace with ourselves.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So well said. So you mentioned the book Conscious Living. Do you have any other books that helped you kind of make this transformation?
So many, man. You should see you should see my room is full with books, filled to the brim. And I could rattle off some books, but the best place, go to DannyMiranda.com/notes for anyone listening, because that will have all the books that I read and all the books that I recommend, and just see what hits you there. But like I've such a hard time giving book recommendations because I'm just looking at myself, right? Like if I read The Power of Now 3 years ago, I did, and I just was like, this is dumb. Like I don't get it. Like what's the point? Like I couldn't get through 2 chapters, and then you read it 3 years later. Like I read it today, and I'm like, oh, this is profound. I get this. This makes a lot of sense to me. And so I'm hesitant to say like you should read this book or you should read that book, but you know, that wasn't your question, obviously. Yours is much more nuanced. But books that helped me, I mean, Resilience by Eric Greitens was a really helpful book for me. That was recommended by Hunter Weiss. And just because Resilience was about a Navy SEAL talking to another Navy SEAL going on hard times and struggles after being in the Navy, and is really helpful book to anyone going through a hard time or not. And I highly recommend that, and Conscious Living, and then so many others, but danmiranda.com/notes.
I think it's a really good point you made about books, right? Like I feel the same way. I feel like in order to give a book recommendation, you kind of have to be a doctor and know the symptoms of the person you're prescribing the book to.
So well said. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Right. So it's kind of like, it's kind of difficult to just rattle off like, read these 5 books and you're going to be like transformed. But I think Conscious Living is a really good start, though, just for anybody. I've read that book myself after seeing you talk about it on Twitter, and it's been remarkable, to say the least.
So it's like when you read a book, do you feel as if it's calling to you? Because that's kind of how I feel sometimes. Like, oh, this is the book I'm supposed to be reading. Because if I don't like the book, I'll just put it down. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, 1000%. And it's like, so like what I do is like usually when people recommend books to me, I'll buy the book immediately and then I'll just like put it around the house. And then when I feel like an inclination to like pick it up, that's when I'll dive in deeper.
I do the same exact thing.
That's amazing. So kind of talking about a point related, but not really, kind of the opposite. Recently, you did a no tech detox, right? Walk me through that experience. What prompted you to do that? How was that experience? Talk us through what that experience entailed and some of the lessons you learned from doing that.
Yeah, so I got this idea from you. I used one of the Tej Dosa letters. Everyone should go check that out. I don't remember which one, but it had your process. And I decided on doing this probably in April or May when I was starting to feel like I was getting myself under control, but I was still receiving all these inputs from the world. And I was curious, what would life be like if I wasn't receiving any inputs? And it's so funny, man, because when I was in that cabin, I was writing and journaling all the time, constantly. And it's where I was really laying the groundwork for this podcast. And I had like 100 people I wanted to reach out to and ideas. And to take you through what it was like, it was something that I'd never experienced before. 5 days, barely talking to anyone, not using any technology. And the first couple of days were really difficult for me. I felt like something was off. I wanted to check Twitter. I wanted to receive texts. I had that urge to check something. We check all these things all day and like, email, text, whatever. And like, there comes a point when you expect it. I realized like I expected to get a text, but I couldn't check my phone. So that was weird. It took me 2 days to get over that. But thankfully, there was such amazing nature. I brought some books with me. So I wasn't like getting no inputs whatsoever. But I was spending 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour evening meditating. I was doing yoga. I was running. I was lifting weight. I was not lifting weights. I was doing push-ups, doing pull-ups under a bridge, like staying active, taking a lot of walks. And so first 2 days, very difficult. The third day, I noticed a shift in me. I had gotten comfortable with it. I'd gotten used to the situation. I was able to tell what was going on. And I was journaling the entire time. And I was able to start to see my life in third person. And it was the craziest experience that I really, truly wish for everyone to experience, because I was detached. And I felt this way when meditating, but only for brief periods of time. And I sometimes feel this way when I'm going through my day, but only brief periods of time. But imagine a full day of viewing yourself in third person. Like, oh, this Danny Miranda character, this is what he's doing, this is what he's doing wrong, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, holy shit, this is exciting. This is awesome. And one book that I read, actually on that retreat, I read 3 or 4 books on there, but 2 crazy things. One was that I read the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. And he was talking about, in his autobiography, sailing down the Delaware River when he was trying to get to New York or something like that. And I was reading this, I shit you not, on the Delaware River. That's exactly where the book was taking place. And he was talking, it was crazy, man.
Wow.
And he was talking about publishing and writing, and he was talking about creating a society of smart people. And I felt like, oh my God, I'm about to do this with the podcast. And he was a publisher, author originally. And so it was really crazy to read, and like gives me chills to this day to think about that synchronicity. The other book that I read, one of the other books, was Chasing Excellence. And this was a book by Ben Bergeron, and he led 2 CrossFit champions in the same year, the men's champion and the women's champion in 2016. And this book was unbelievable, and it just fired me up because he talked about the process of a champion and the mindset of a champion, and what they did on a day-to-day basis was not focus on winning the CrossFit Games. That's not what you focus on. You focus on, how can I make this moment the best moment? And just saying that brings me so much enjoyment and excitement, because it's like, it's literally the same thing with this podcast, right? Like, how can I make this moment, this conversation, be the best possible conversation? Don't focus on being the number 1 podcast of all time. Like, that's where I want to go. That's my intention, but you can't focus on that. You have to focus on the day-to-day, right? You have to focus on what's going on in this moment, because you can never get to where you want to go if you focus on that. Anyway, process-oriented thinking, and it just fired me up. Easy read, highly recommend it. And so on that 3rd day, I just felt so at peace and so ready to get after it. I journaled, this are the changes I'm going to make. This is what I'm going to do. And 4th day, same thing. Like, just hungry, ready to get after it. And 6th day, I drove back and was super excited and just felt so at peace and so optimistic about life. And I truly wish that everyone experiences that feeling of optimism going back into the world. Just, it's pure love and pure excitement. And
that's amazing, bro.
It was an incredible
trip.
Trip.
That's amazing. I remember recently, I think I saw you tweeting about this experience, and you mentioned something that I was super excited about, because like, I'm kind of a crazy person, and this really spoke to me. But you were talking about how during that detox where you were completely withdrawn from technology and like, quote unquote, the modern world, you had a period where you kind of started forgetting who you were, who Danny Miranda was. Like, you started forgetting the story of Danny Miranda. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because I'm super curious. This is kind of like my question.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was reviewing my mentality folder every day prior to going on this trip. And I was like thinking, like, should I bring this or should I not? And I didn't bring it. I don't know why, but I think it was partly because I knew that I was going to be reborn on this trip in some way. Right. And, just like anything you do changes you, anything you do makes you a new person and reborns you in some way. And I knew this was going to be probably a transformational experience in some sense. It was so different. And I realized that, people know me as Danny all the time. They talk to me as Danny. But when no one was doing that, when no one was reminding me of who I was, I forgot. I was like, who am I again? And that was super exciting, because from that place, you can then create any reality you want. And if you are not attached to, like, the example you can give is like, I was so attached to my identity in September 2019 as someone who couldn't do what they said they was going to do, who was just stuck in that average life. Like I was stuck there, and that was part of my identity. But in this trip, I was like, fast forwarding, I was going well in life, but I was forgetting who I was, and that was such an exciting thing because I was like,
wow.
Oh my God, I'm going well, but I can go even better. I can go bigger. I can go, in a whole nother realm. And so that was super exciting for me as well.
Wow. Bro, that's amazing because like my personal opinion is like all we really are is a story, and we can change that story any moment.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I mean, it's just the world we're living in is so able to be shaped by our own mind, and we don't realize that because we have so many inputs directing us constantly. And spending time with yourself is loving yourself, and you realize, holy shit, I can create whatever reality I want. And that's a super exciting place to come from.
Yeah, like one thing I do personally is like I always use this question: who would I be without the stories in my head? And like I've kind of asked myself that question on a consistent basis, and you kind of arrive at this point where you realize that you're just life. Like we're not separate from life. Life is flowing through us. We are life. And like everything that we put on top of life is just a story. But if you can kind of delete the stories and go back to just being this expanded life, then you realize that there's really nothing to fear because you are all of it. And it's so easy to love everything because to love yourself is to love life. And by default, you end up loving everything that is a part of life. And that kind of just puts you in this powerful state where you're just one with everything, and kind of touches upon what we talked about towards the beginning of this podcast.
How do you operate from that place? Like if you are life, if you are everything, how do you operate and like not lose yourself in the world? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. How do you not I'm trying to find the right words here.
No, I feel you.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
How do you continue to progress as a human being, like as Tej Dosa, if you also view yourself as life? Because I know exactly what you're saying as that oneness, but I want other people to understand that you're not giving up your individual accomplishments or trying to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. For me, like, I've like had to go through a lot of trial and error. There's been numerous instances where I lost myself, right? So what has really worked for me is a kind of a balance between the two, right? So it's like you're all of life, you're this full presence, and I try to embody that presence throughout my daily life. But you mentioned a little while ago that mentality folder, right? So that mentality folder is kind of my compass for kind of like reminding myself of who I want my character to be, not who I am, who I want my character to be in the video game of life, right? So like you ever, I think there's this movie called like 50 First Dates where like the girl in the movie kept forgetting who she was, and every day Adam Sandler had to remind her of who she was, or like whatever, they had to keep repeating that situation, right? I kind of view life kind of like similar personally. It's like every day you wake up with a blank slate. And then I'm like, wow, like everything's like so peaceful, so joyful. You're just so like connected to everything. Like if it wasn't from a mentality folder, bro, I can spend all day just looking at a tree. Like I wouldn't get anything done. You know what I mean? I would just be like, wow, like look at this. We're alive. We're breathing. We're present. Like this is fucking amazing. Like how amazing is it that we can have this conversation and like take into consideration all of evolution, like whatever. Like even what I texted you yesterday, I'm like, how amazing is it to be a fucking human being? And you're like, bro, like this shit is just cracking me up, right? And then so like the mentality folder is kind of like my compass regarding to like who do I want to show up as. So I kind of view myself, and I think everybody is really just an actor, but the problem is we're unpaid actors because we don't know we're actors, because we're wearing this character, this role, and we keep playing this every single day, not realizing that we're actually something much larger. So the mentality folder is kind of like my way of, I know I'm everything. I know I'm all of life, and I'm connected to everything. Everything is one, but I'm still on the stage of life as this individual character that people and myself call Tej. So how do I want this character to show up in the movie of life? And then that mentality folder is kind of like the scripts for my character, like I'm an actor on Broadway or whatever. So like just memorizing those scripts, just allowing those structures, those habits, those routines, but at the same time knowing that I'm so much more powerful than that. Because every time you pick a character to play, you limit yourself. You take this whole expansive life and you funnel it into a character. And that's when, even though a character can be really empowering, if we get attached to that character, we kind of miss out on life. And that happened to me. I was so invested in my character that I realized that I had missed out on life. The whole process, the whole journey of life. I was perceiving life through this limited character, even though the character was quote unquote successful. It wasn't really what I truly wanted. So I balanced the two like that. So the mentality folder is kind of like, hey, dummy, like I know you're everything. I know you're this. I know you're that. But like, yo, you still got like bills to pay, you know?
Where can people find the mentality folder?
Oh, yeah. So the mentality folder, I'll probably tweet out a link to it. You can just subscribe to the email list, and then I think you can just pick it up through there. So just my Twitter bio at Comedic Bisman, and then you should be able to find it.
Sweet. Yeah, I just want people to get. I've used this folder for, I don't know, 2 years now, a year and a half. Crazy situation. I mean, it's just like, it's just repeating and like programming your brain to view life a certain way. And so super helpful. So thank you, man.
Yeah, no worries. So like I want to touch upon like two more things. So one thing that you really talked about throughout this entire conversation that kind of keeps coming back, besides meditation, of course, is journaling, right? So whether you were in a downward spiral, whether you were at your highest of highs, whether you were on a no tech detox, I noticed that journaling was a common pattern amongst all those things. So talk briefly about your journaling habit, what that entails, how it looks like, how frequently do you do it? Is this something that you only do when you feel called to? Do you have a set time in your day? What do you write about? Do you have certain questions you ask yourself? Like just take it wherever you want to take it.
Such a great question. So my journaling habit isn't as consistent as I would like, but I do it enough that I'm content with that. So I don't have specific questions. It's free flowing. And what I do on every entry is I list the date, and then I list the time, and then I list the location. But other than that, I just let it rip. And I just open the journal when I feel called to. And I probably would be better off making a consistent habit of every night of doing it set times, because what I find when I review old journals is that they're skewed negative rather than positive, because I'm writing them to complain. And the truth is that there's so much joy that I missed out on because I didn't journal in good times. But
right.
There were, and so that is a common mistake that I've made in the past. And so maybe this conversation will fuel me to make it a habit. But yeah, I mean, I do it when I feel called to, and it's really helpful to just have my life documented. In my life, you forget. I have no idea what I had for dinner 3 weeks ago. Like I couldn't tell you. And it's very hard for most people. Like we forget. And it's the same thing with the little events in our life. And one thing that I recommend myself do and other people is like when you're journaling, make it more obvious to yourself than you think. Because when you're in a situation, you could just be like, oh, I'm on a call with a guy. Like you forget that like the context disappears with time. And so if you take up a journaling habit, one thing I've noticed is that when I'm more obvious, it's better. Like I learn more and it is more helpful. What about you? Yeah. What's your journaling habit like?
No, that's honestly a really good 2 tips that I got from that. I'm going to implement myself because I feel like I do the same thing. When I'm like riding high, I'm like, fuck journaling, right? once I'm like crippled and like down and out, then I'm like, where the fuck's my journal?
I'm glad
like,
you can relate.
yeah, so you like miss out on so many good moments. And like the second thing, that was a really good point, bro. Like to be more obvious, right? I do the same thing. Like just keep it so vague, and then I flip through it like a week or two later.
And you're like, who the fuck is this guy?
Like I don't even remember this. So that's super interesting. Mine, I'm like kind of like all over the place what they do. Like I don't really have it structured. It's more so just like kind of like the books, right? Like how I treat the books. It's like the journal is always like around, right? And if I feel like inclined to pick it up, then I'll pick it up. But I kind of want to get into what you're saying as well, like make it kind of a daily thing. Because what I used to do, which was fucking remarkable, but like, you know, being human, like you stop doing the shit that was fucking remarkable. I don't know why. But I would actually journal at the end of every day, and then on the end of December, so like the end of the year, I would take a week off and I would reread my entire journal for that entire year to see where I was when I started, what I went through in that year, and how I led to where I am as I'm reading the journal. And it's like we spend so much time reading other people's books, reading other people's content. Why not write a journal about your year and read that at the end of the year to end that, and then aim to create a better journal for the next year?
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds beautiful. The hardest part is sticking to it, like everything, you know, and making that a habit and make it easy enough to be doable, and like I guess keeping it by your bed and just reminding yourself, you know. But yeah, that's incredible that you did that, and I'm sure you had so many insights and were viewing yourself in third person so well from doing that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think that like what you touched upon on that tech detox is like that third person perspective. I feel like is really powerful, and it's something I've seen in like a lot of really successful athletes in particular, right? They have a way of kind of like viewing themselves as somebody that's watching them on television.
Detachment is so huge in Navy SEALs, athletes, business people, anyone who is able to achieve something is usually viewing it themselves as a character, it seems like, from what I've read at least.
Yeah, 1000%. One of the last things, I know I said two things, but I'm like super curious. So I got like a couple more things left, right? So
good.
One thing that I want to touch upon is life purpose, right? So I've seen you mention this on more than one occasion, where your life purpose is to become the greatest version of myself and help others do the same, to make the world happier, healthier, and wiser.
Yep.
Did that life purpose come as a result of what you went through this past year? And is it a result of those habits where, whether it's meditation, you started listening to yourself more, whether it was journaling, whether it was setting higher standards for yourself? How did you arrive at this life purpose? Because I feel like, one, it's I think one of the ultimate life purposes to have. But like, even with the people that kind of reach out to me, I feel like they're always stuck on their life purpose. It's understandable, right? It's like we're born, we don't really know like what the fuck we're doing here, and then all these people tell us to do XYZ, but inside our hearts we feel like, I don't really know if XYZ is the right thing to do, but because we don't feed that inner voice, we tend to give in to external society, and then we end up 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and we're like, holy fuck, like something you tweeted, I believe, the top regrets of the dying. Number one, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself. And I think that really comes down to understanding your life purpose and having the balls to pursue that purpose, even though all of society is trying to distract you with bullshit or things that don't align with your purpose. So going back to you, how did you arrive at that life purpose, and what tips would you give to other people to kind of figure out their own purpose?
Such a great question. And I'm going back to a journal entry on August 4th, 2020 from the evening in Pennsylvania in this Airbnb. Here's the biggest change from reviewing all these journal entries. I started loving myself, and everything changed as a result. I love myself for who I was and love myself by pursuing the highest version of myself. I began to create DannyMiranda.com and on Twitter. I figured out a clear vision and purpose, But this came after I started stringing together enough positive days in a row. The last 5 months have been absolutely transformative. So what that tells me is that, and what I can recall is like, when you look at my journal entries from January and February of 2020, you get 1 day is great, 1 day's awful. 1 day's great, 1 day's awful. Like, it's crazy. It just goes like a roller coaster. And then once I started stringing together enough positive days of doing what I was supposed to be doing, all the habits that you know and are helpful to you, and you start doing that, well, you know, it's like, it's crazy what happens. So I remember very clearly that I was sitting down outside my house and just like sitting in the sun, not thinking of anything, and something hit me, and it was crazy, like literally like lightning is the only way I could describe it. And I got up and I saw what I wanted to be on my gravestone, and I ran inside. Like,
wow,
it was just like a moment of like, whoa, like I didn't come up with that. Like, where did that come from? Like, maybe some deep part of my brain, but like, holy shit. And it was literally like Daniel Miranda, 1995 to whatever, made the world happier, healthier, and wiser, or something like that. And I was just like, oh my God, like, where did that come from?
Damn.
And it was so powerful. And I wrote it down on a Post-it note. I had it on my computer for a few months, just looked at it every day. And it was powerful, man, because I just knew, like, and to become the greatest version of myself is if I could do that, if I could become the greatest version of me, then I can also inspire other people to become the greatest version of themselves. But I can't control you. I can't control you listening. I can't control you, Tej, but I can control myself. So if I can do that and use my life as an example, then the world will be a better place because of it. So, yeah, I got to that purpose by taking action first and having enough positive days in a row. And then it was almost like God gave me the key, the insight. Like, okay, you did what you're supposed to do. Here is what you will be known for, or here was what you will strive to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great testament of God only helps those who first help themselves.
Yeah, exactly right.
Bro, that's amazing. So how has your life changed after discovering that purpose and aligning yourself with it? Because I feel like that's what everybody wants, right? They feel like once I get this purpose, then I can stop taking so many random actions, stop expending so much random energy, and dial it all in towards this. Yeah.
So what was the question again?
Like, how has your life changed as a result of discovering this purpose and aligning your behaviors to match it?
Right. So what's changed is that, like, it gives you a question to ask yourself at all times, right? And if you have a way to say, okay, is what I'm doing in this moment is this aligning with the greater vision? Yes? Then do it, right? Like, I think that we fall into this place of mediocrity often because we don't have a singular big question and a singular big vision. And when we do, it's very easy to say, okay, this aligns with me or this doesn't. And you could be wrong. Like, who knows? This podcast could not be aligning with the highest version of myself. That's absolutely possible. But I believe it is in this moment, and that's good enough for me. And so it's like, if you have that question and you're constantly asking throughout the day, small actions, like, am I looking at my phone right now? Is this aligning with the highest version of myself? No? Okay, like, put it down. And then, okay, like, I'm working out right now. Is doing this extra set aligning with the highest version of myself? Yes? Okay, good. Do it. Like, it's a simple equation. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. But it gives me a guiding light to shine all my decisions against. And when I go off track, it allows me to say, okay, like, I know what to do to get back on track because I have this question and I'm just constantly asking myself it.
That's so powerful because it kind of answers a lot of the stuff from early on as well, right? Like when we were discussing how do you live up to your standards and how do you hold yourself accountable? It's like, I feel like you need that anchor. You need that question that you can use as you go through your day-to-day life to kind of, I feel like life is like driving, right? It's not like you just succeed or lose. It's like a series of decisions that you make that help you keep your car driving towards what you want without taking weird turns or steering off course. And questions like that allow you to make that happen.
Yeah. Do you have any questions that you lean on like that, or any way to guide yourself?
Yeah, so I have this reminder. It goes off on my phone like 3 times a day. And it's like, is what you're doing the most productive use of time? And it doesn't just mean work, right? It means like,
Yep.
Are you living the life that you want to be living? It could be like hanging out with friends and just making that the best moment ever, or a call like this, or exercising or meditating or whatever. Just kind of like appreciating the time that you have in life and making the most out of it. So kind of going off that note, I kind of want to ask, based on all these experiences you've collected so much raw data, you have amazing journal entries, we've seen the highs, we've seen the lows, we've seen the journey that you went on, all the habits you picked up along the way that allowed you to raise your standards and really live a life of alignment. How would you take all that? And let's say, if or when you have children, what lessons would you pass on, or how would you go about using all these experiences to raise them to be the strongest version of themselves?
All right, son. We're going to start with episode 1 of the Danny Miranda podcast.
Oh, now I understand your dirty little scheme here, eh? Record all these episodes, give it to the kids, and be like, all right, kids, I'm out. Just listen to the podcast.
I write all the posts on my website for my children. It's also a good guiding principle, because if I am ever blessed to have children in this life, it's like I write for them, and I truly do. It's like everything I'm writing to remind myself, and also to act as a guide for the next generation. I mean, how cool would it be if your grandchildren could see, your great-grandchildren could see, what were you thinking and how were you thinking? And here's a document, and hopefully my great-grandchildren still can access this, because who knows, like with the way computers work, but I think they can. And if that is the case, like everything I write is for them. And to answer your question directly, it's like, I want my children, I want people them to be able to see the highest versions of themselves. And you do that by letting them live life and experience life, and not saying like, you have to do this, you have to meditate, you have to, that doesn't help. It's like, right. People come to their own decisions, their own ways of being, and it's best that way. And it's just like, can you embody that? Like, I think more important than anything I say will be what I embody in every moment. And it's like, I am so blessed, Tej. You have no idea, to have, incredible role models in my life, from my dad, my brother, my mom, my grandpa, my grandma, like my other grandma passed away, like literally incredible people in my life that I can look to every single day for inspiration on how to act, because these people literally all act in the appropriate way, and appropriate way for living a happy, healthy life. And listen, I am starting life on third base by having this example, because I know that 99.9% of people would die to be in this position of having these role models. So wow. I am so grateful for these people in my life, truly, and I am blessed, and I want to do my best to embody what they've helped me embody by being that living, breathing example in person, without saying this is what you have to do, by living their truth. And they've all lived their truth and continue to do so to this day, other than my grandma, rest in peace. But it's like living their truth every day is the greatest example you can give to a child. And so that's how I would go about doing it.
Wow, that's amazing. Shout out to the Miranda family. I feel like that's really it. Like, it's easy to tell somebody to do XYZ, but if you embody it, then it's like a no question. And that's what I feel like children really pick up on. So that's amazing. And your life is kind of like a testament to that, right? So that's amazing to see that you recognize that pattern, and you can now take that same pattern, apply it yourself, and embody whatever you want your children to learn.
Yeah, and continuing that cycle of love and just to continue it on, like there's nothing more that would make me happier for my children to receive the love that I received as a child.
Amazing. What's your definition of love? I know this is like one of those like
deep questions, like what's the meaning of life? I would say when you feel oneness with another thing, person, being. If you think of laughter, right? When we laugh about something, that is love, because we are becoming one in that moment. So I would say love is whenever you become one in any moment with someone or something else.
Bro, I think you nailed it, bro. I think you nailed it. That's it. I agree 1000%. So to end this, what does the future look like for Danny Miranda?
I want to continue scaling this love as high and far as it will go. I have so much in me to give, and and what you realize from doing a lot, like I feel like I've done a lot. I've worked hard this year. I've done my best. I've shown up in every moment, starting in March 15th, right? But what you realize from doing all that is like, oh, you've done a lot? Well, it expands your capacity to give. It expands your capacity to love. It expands what is possible. And 2021, I hope, will be the greatest year ever, from an experience of success on the Danny Miranda podcast, from an experience of giving love to other people, from an experience of just being able to give my best in every single moment and continue asking myself, what will the highest version of myself do in this moment? And I just want to give that to as many people as possible, as deep as possible, as true as possible, as real, and continue spreading that mission and spreading that love, brother. That's what I plan for 2021 and beyond to look like.
Amazing. I think future is looking bright, all green lights ahead, and I'm so stoked to see the journey continue. So to end this, where can the beautiful people of Earth hear more about Danny, learn more about you? Rumor has it you have a really successful podcast or something?
The podcast is the best place to find me. You can tweet me at Hey Danny Miranda. I love your feedback on this episode. As always, I would love to hear an email from you if you listened this far. I know probably I have a lot of sympathy for you for listening this far. I appreciate you though tremendously. Danny at DannyMiranda.com. Thank you so much. And Tej, you're an incredible interviewer, brother. Truly, like, is this your first time you've done an interview? Like, this is you should have your own podcast. What are you doing, bro? You're natural. Thank you. I appreciate that. This was my first time, but it's easier for me because like we're just like really good friends, and it's easy to have the conversation. And plus, like, I know a lot about your story, and like I consume your content, so it's like really easy to kind of just have a natural conversation. It doesn't even feel like a podcast, Yeah, this was just us catching up and reviewing the past year and a half of my life, and exactly. I wouldn't be where I am today without you. So I am so grateful for you, and everything you see today is because of you believing in me from the early days and before I even believed in myself. And it's just a manifestation, and just goes to show the amount that you can love and the amount that the impact you are having. Because every time I impact someone, it's really you impacting someone too. So thank you, brother.
Bro, that's amazing. And likewise, you inspire the hell out of me. Like, I've tweeted it before, like seeing your journey, seeing your transformation, and seeing just how much you've done in such little time is honestly like the most remarkable thing I've ever seen. And like, out of everybody I know, I consider you to be the most successful because you embody everything that people want but they try to get that by chasing external things, which is cool. Chase those external things. Personally, I chase those all day long, right? But embody the stage that you want before you start chasing things, because that just makes life so magical. And I feel like you are the best testament to that. And just seeing your journey unfold is remarkable. And it's like a really, really great pleasure to watch.
Thank you, man. And it's just crazy. It's just crazy because I appreciate that, and I feel that with every fiber in my being, man. And I'm just really grateful.
1000%, bro. Like that feeling of gratitude and love, and embodying that on a daily basis, going to sleep with that running through your body, waking up with that running through your body, having that feeling as you interact with your mom, dad, brother, grandma, grandparents, grandpa, and then tweeting, writing content, hopping on calls, podcasting. It's remarkable. And I think it's like one of the reasons why when Spotify was revealing the stuff that what you spend all this year listening to, the Danny Miranda podcast was #1 on my list. And I've seen a lot of people, it was in their top 5. And I feel like you have a very unique talent in the sense that you can scale love, because every time I listen to a podcast, I just hear and feel love and high energy. And I know how difficult it is to do that because, bro, I've listened to a lot of your podcasts and you keep that up on every single podcast. And I know some days life happens, like some shit happens. You probably don't feel as good, but I could never fucking tell as a listener because you actually embody love in midst of pain, in spite of turmoil, in spite of whatever may be going wrong. And I think that alone is victory.
I appreciate that, man. And the other thing is, like, you can't fake it, right? Like, people would know, you know, like...
Exactly.
You know, like, when I started to feel this way of pure love and pure happiness, I was almost thinking to myself, like, yo, am I faking this right now? Like, am I just trying to convince myself of this? Because, like, I was in such a bad place. How could I be feeling this only 3 months later? You know, like, how could... It didn't make sense to me. And it's just the truth, man. Like, that's just the truth. Like, and I really am. And I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate you listening, man. And the future is looking bright. That's all we could say, right?
Super excited. Super excited. I'm so happy that we made this happen and we got the Danny Miranda story out there.
Hello, beautiful people. We're back. And if you listened the entire way through, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for listening. Thank you for getting to the final outro. It is truly appreciated. And if you're not signed up to my free weekly newsletter, take this opportunity to go to DannyMiranda.com/Tuesday, because you listen to this whole episode, you might as well want to hear a little bit more from me. Thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.